So we have some breaking news from the Tulsi Gabbard campaign. They have made a monumental change to the National Defense Authorization Act. And basically, Tulsi has made it. Tulsi did this. She's made it so that if any entity, United States or otherwise, like if they're allies with the United States, if they give money to a terrorist organization or if they give to an entity that provides arms or finances a terrorist organization, then they will be penalized under U.S. law. This is made possible because Tulsi has officially got the Stop Arming Terrorist Act passed, or at least it's included in the NDAA, which is expected to pass. That is, that's a big deal. So let's check out the press release from the Tulsi Gabbard campaign and talk a little bit about what this means. So Representative Gabbard secured the inclusion of a provision in the 2020 National Defense Authorization Act that was passed early this morning, which would prohibit the use of taxpayer funds to provide weapons or any form of support to Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State of Iraq, which is ISIS, the Jabhat Fateh al-Sham, or any individual or group associated with these organizations or any entity the Secretary of Defense determines may trade or sell arms to terrorist organizations. Unfortunately, in their dogged pursuit of regime change war, leaders in Washington have used taxpayer dollars to fund programs that directly and indirectly support terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda in places like Syria. And this continues in Yemen, where U.S. support for Saudi Arabia's genocidal war in Yemen has resulted in Saudis delivering U.S. weapons to terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda, as reported by CNN earlier this year. That's just one of the statements made by Tulsi Gabbard in regards to the necessity of the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't the first time that she's introduced this, and it's probably going to be surprising to a lot of you. This was done in 2016. Now, the fact that Tulsi has to introduce legislation to stop arming and funding terrorism, period, that should be breaking news. That should be headline news. But it wasn't. And what should have also been headline news was how little support she got and how it was not passed or included in the NDAA the first time she introduced it. See, unlike a lot of our senators and representatives and mayors or whatever that are in this race, just because a presidential election had concluded and another presidential election had begun, didn't mean that Tulsi Gabbard, along with a couple of other progressives, stopped working. In fact, realizing the political environment we're in, whether it's domestically or with foreign policy, it seemed like Tulsi is one of the couple of Congress people that worked harder. This was one of those acts. Now, the first time she introduced this was in 2016, and her statement regarding the necessity for this act, even then, was like, wait a minute, what? I mean, we knew because of WikiLeaks, we knew what was happening. America is still kind of like in a haze regarding this issue. Like, remember, we're supposed to be, quote unquote, fighting the war on terror, quote unquote, but we're actually funding it. Like, the whole reason that thousands of soldiers have died, millions of civilians overseas have died, was because we're supposedly fighting this war on terror. It turns out to be the exact opposite. Now, Tulsi said in 2016, when she first introduced this legislation that many of you may not have even heard of, under U.S. law, it is illegal for any American to provide money or assistance to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or other terrorist groups. If you or I gave money, weapons, or support to Al-Qaeda or ISIS, we would be thrown in jail. 100% true. And once again, something that needed to be said. Now she goes on to say, yet the U.S. government has been violating this for years, quietly supporting allies and partners of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Jabhat Fateh, Alam, Al-Sham, and other terrorist groups with money, weapons, and intelligence support in their fight to overthrow the Syrian government. So Tulsi has been blowing the whistle on our own government since 2016. She goes on to say that the CIA has also been funneling weapons and money through Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, and others who provide direct and indirect support to groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. This support has allowed Al-Qaeda and their fellow terrorist organizations to establish strongholds throughout Syria, including Aleppo. A recent New York Times article confirmed that rebel groups supported by the U.S. have entered into battlefield alliances with the affiliate of Al-Qaeda in Syria, formerly known as Al-Nusra. This alliance has rendered the phrase moderate rebels meaningless. Reports confirm that every armed anti-Assad organization unit in those provinces of Idlib and Aleppo is engaged in a military structure controlled by Al-Qaeda militants. Yo, why was this not breaking news? I don't know how many other ways I can tell people the same thing over and over again. If you're trying to figure out why Tulsi Gabbard is being smeared, if you're trying to figure out who's the biggest threat to the establishment, if you're trying to figure out why they keep lying, calling Tulsi an Assad sympathizer, a Putin puppet, a Russian asset, because she's telling the truth. As many of you all saw in the video yesterday, Tulsi predicted the escalations in Iran by the Trump administration. Just a month before the Japanese oil tankers were attacked and the U.S. tried to blame Iran. That video was taken down because she told the truth. And she did it in a way where she predicted exactly how it would, not exactly how it would be done, but she predicted that they're going to set something up. They're trying to set something up as a pretext to her. Because they said, well, they're worried about escalations in the region. They're moving U.S. diplomats, et cetera, et cetera. She said, nope, they're trying to set up a pretext to go to war with Iran, to push for war with Iran. I don't buy it. And guess what happens? She's been telling the truth, and she's been not only calling out the government, but calling out the government and then officially introducing legislation to hold officials accountable. Now, I want to draw a stark contrast between Tulsi Gabbard really quick and Elizabeth Warren. One of the biggest, I guess they call it say it's one of her successes, was the Financial Consumer Protection Bureau. That's all well and good. It's done okay. It does some good things. Lacks in a lot of other areas, but I'm not going to blame Warren for where it lacks at because Warren is not in charge of it at this moment. But what I will say is this. Warren was in charge of a committee that could have held banks and other executives on Wall Street accountable. You all remember these hearings. She was wagging her finger, wag, 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 wag. And if any real progressives who have done their research recognize it was all grandstanding, she was dancing for peanuts, but she never once recommended accountability. That is the one mechanism that we have lacked, is that no matter who we've loved, whether it's Bernie, whether it's Warren, whether it's AOC, whether it's Elon, whether it's Rashida, doesn't matter. Pick whoever. The one mechanism that we have lacked in our processes when we're having these hearings and having these discussions is a person with gravitas, with the exposure to say, okay, wagging the finger's cool. Calling them out even is cool. But now, in order for the people to have confidence in their democracy, which the people don't at this moment, in order for the people to have confidence in our justice system, that it will apply equally to the everyday American and to the elites and the politicians, we must have accountability. Tulsi Gabbard is the only presidential candidate who has introduced legislation. She introduced the Stop Arming Terrorists Act, Stop Financing Terrorists Act. She's also introduced and is about to reintroduce the No More Presidential Wars Act. It seems like her entire, because understand something, if she wins, then she would be likely the one who stands to be potentially punished or held accountable by her own legislation by being the president / commander in chief. Understand, like, if people always say the drone strike argument against her. First of all, once again, Bernie supports drones as well. He didn't say use them all willy-nilly, but he says the reality of the situation is we do need drones, even if it's as a defense. But that doesn't mean we go use them. But under Tulsi Gabbard's No More Presidential Wars Act, unauthorized drone strikes unauthorized by Congress, would be an act of war, and she would be penalized under, or she could be penalized under her own legislation. So once again, this looks like another attempt to dilute power that she could potentially have one day. It's almost like she's running to not have it. Like she's diffusing the concentration of power in the executive office, and we need more of that. It's follows suit with her speeches. Everything is about all of us have to participate if we want this representative democracy to thrive. It can't be decisions made by one person. Now, there's another thing I want to bring up before we go. There has been a lie being pushed. There's a graphic that has gone around. Many of you have seen it. Many of you have even asked me about it. And I was kind of confused by it because it didn't make sense because that wasn't true. And I knew it wasn't true, but information hadn't been released yet. So there's a graphic going around that says that in 2017, which is weird, because it says it's from Veterans for Bernie. And I don't know if that's actually the case. I would hope that Veterans for Bernie isn't going around pushing a lie about Tulsi for any, political agenda. It could have been legitimately an accident, but it says that for the 2017 budget, Tulsi voted against it. For the 2018 budget, Tulsi voted against it. And for the 2019 budget, that she voted for it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a lie. That's a lie. And it says that Elizabeth Warren voted against it and that Bernie voted against it as well, but Tulsi voted for it. I don't know what they're talking about because it's either one of two things. If they're talking about voting in 2018 for the 2019 budget, that's a lie. That would be what? HR. Let me see if I can find it. So that would be the HR 5515 conducted July 26, 2018, the National Defense Authorization Act. Tulsi voted against that. So that's a lie. And I don't know who, or they're talking about voting in 2019 for 2020. However, like I said, the legislation is generally voted on in July, 1, and 2, they didn't sit down until last Wednesday to even discuss the allocation of funds, which is why shortly after that, the press release that explained the press release from Tulsi Gabbard's campaign that they included the Stop Arming Terrorists Act in this legislation. And that is according to justsecurity.org. They didn't sit down. The Armed Services Committee, the Armed Services Committee didn't even sit down to discuss the fiscal budget of 2020 for the National Defense Authorization Act until last Wednesday. So once again, the lies continue to be pushed. I don't know if it was by accident, but a lot of the smears have been pushed by accident from Bernie supporters, people who used to support Tulsi until she started running. And they could verify these and that's not everybody, by the way. By and large, it is not everybody, but it's enough. It's enough that it's a concern because it looks opportunistic and lazy. If you're pushing this graphic, you are in the wrong because Tulsi did not vote for that budget. Now, for the 2020 budget, I'm sure she'll vote for it if it means we stop arming terrorists, perhaps. And what's even slicker, so the war in Yemen is a problem. Trump did not sign that bill, but this is how you know somebody is a finesser. The bill to end the war in Yemen included what? How are we going to go about doing it? Stop funding Saudi Arabia and giving them arms that will eventually be used in Yemen. Okay, cool, Trump. You don't want to sign that? Fine. I'm just going to include this little piece right here that says you can't do it anyway. In other words, because Saudi Arabia gives weapons to terrorists, we can no longer sell them weapons. We can no longer fund their operations. In practice, we'll see if it actually happens. But we can no longer fund their operations according to this legislation, at least without Trump and whoever's involved being penalized. Therefore, it means that the war in Yemen should, just because the bill gets passed doesn't mean that, it'll happen. But that means that effectively, we should stop funding Saudi Arabia and the war in Yemen should be dwindling down. That would be because of Tulsi Gabbard's act, because of her bill. So when you want to talk about having a plan, that's what a plan looks like. Fuck that shit 2020. Thanks for watching that segment of Mi Casa es Su Casa. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Roku TV, and on JustNForm.com. Also, you can make sure that you're subscribed to the channel by going to the subscribe button, pressing it, and hitting that notification bell to get all of our notifications. And of course, you can help us reach our goal of 500 patrons on Patreon by supporting the show by donating as little as $1. You can click on the link in the description below for that. And remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.